All right, we have a lot of information to cover today, so let's get started. Welcome to this webinar, everyone. My name is Molly Vole. I'm with Community Playthings in Sales and Marketing. I'm going to be talking about how the Grow-Right Stool came to be. It's a story about the history and science that drove our team's design process, which makes this stool unique, and how the stool can benefit your children's development. Now, luckily for me, I have my good friend and colleague here, Jamie Barton. He is our design manager who will happily answer all the questions you come up with. So as we go along, use the chat to post questions or comments, and we'll circle back at the end of the webinar and discuss all of those. All of you with classroom experience understand that young children do not sit still for long. And what we more typically see are children perching on their feet or legs, slouching over the table, sitting sideways or tipping back in their chairs, you know. So why is there this disconnect between expected behavior at table time and what really goes on in our classrooms? That's the question that inspired us to do a deep dive into the existing research around posture and seating. And our team also spent hours of observation in the field. Our conclusion was that the seating traditionally used in classrooms is actually a major contributing factor towards these unmet behavioral expectations. The traditional seating paradigm is based on a posture I'm sure you're all familiar with. 90 degrees at the hips, 90 degrees at the knees, 90 degrees at the feet. Interestingly, this 90-90-90 position was developed to be used in measuring children and adults in anthropometrics. That's the science of measuring the human body's size, shape, and functional capacities to inform design, but it does not take into consideration what is developmentally appropriate for children. That position was actually never intended to be seen as the ideal seating posture, but it has been widely accepted for decades as the gold standard for classroom seating. Today we're going to walk through the why and how a crucial change in this assumption will help address the challenging behaviors seen in classrooms. A change that addresses seating by understanding children's development and their actual needs. As educators, we know that children develop inside out, top to bottom, large to small. With seating, the whole body development principles apply as well. When considering child development, seating primarily affects our large muscle and core development, which is the necessary foundation for small motor development. It's critical that we get that foundational piece right. Research data used for this project clearly pointed out that the fact 90-90-90 seating can adversely impact development, posture, and the child's ability to focus and learn. After reviewing the research and observation notes, our next question was, what have we all been missing with conventional seating? Take a look at this picture that illustrates the physiological challenge of sitting in that 90-90-90 posture. When the upper leg is parallel to the floor, the pelvis rotates forward, and that lumbar spine goes into a C shape. This in turn causes the head, a significant amount of weight compared to the rest of the body, to pull the cervical spine forward and down. That posture compresses the abdominal and pleural cavities and puts pressure on internal organs, which of course doesn't feel great. It also impedes good lung expansion. Looking at this picture, can you see the difference between the lower back area when you're standing compared to sitting? In the standing position, the tailbone locates out behind the pelvis and the lower back is in a nice curve, with evenly distributed pressure here across the surface of the discs. As soon as that position changes to a 90-degree angle between the back and upper legs, a 90-degree angle at the knees, the pelvis rotates forward and the tailbone tucks underneath the lower back in a flattened position. This sort of C-shaped macaroni curve of the spine places a significant amount of stress on intervertebral joints. And of course, sitting like this for any length of time takes a lot of concentration. You have to continually rotate the pelvis back in order to straighten the spine into a healthy posture. Anatomically good seating posture could be best likened to riding a horse. Here you can see the upper leg sloped significantly downward and the knees quite a bit lower than the hips. This is a very anchored, balanced, comfortable position. Unless, of course, you fall off your horse. Anyways, the image here shows that when the hip joints are in an open, angled position, the working load on large muscle groups of the upper legs are more balanced top and bottom. This increases physical comfort and improves the muscle development. All those considerations around seated posture are what informed the key attributes that we chose were important to be incorporated into our simple, user-friendly design of the Grow-Right Stool. So here's one important takeaway. By seating a child up higher, the pelvis and tailbone naturally rotates back, forming the spine into a lovely neutral S shape. This eliminates uneven pressure on the discs and compression of internal organs. And then, because they're straddling the Grow-Right Stool at this higher level, children remain comfortably anchored. This position of our body fosters core development, mitigating the effects of poor posture, which we know now has actually been enabled by our conventional thinking around 90-90 classroom seating. I mean, who would have thought that something so simple as opening that angle between the torso and upper leg could help address the root cause of challenging behavior at table time? But wait, it gets even better. Another piece of our conventional expectations around table time is that children learn best when sitting still. Now, happily, many voices in the global ECE community are pushing back on that, and research also clearly debunks it. Children are hardwired to move as they focus and learn. Movement is also crucial for vestibular and proprioceptive development. I'm not talking about letting the kids mimic what they saw at the monkey cage last week. You know, that kind of movement is clearly disruptive at table time. The type of movement we're talking about is the subtle accommodations that we need to stay comfortable while seated. I mean, picture yourself at a staff meeting or a webinar. Don't we constantly shift our weight, cross our legs, or change positions as we subconsciously try to find comfort and balance or relief from pressure points? The trigonal shape, along with waterfall edge of the Grow-Right Stool, is designed to invite children to make those movements necessary to stay comfortable. This, when they're comfortable, of course, it helps them maintain focus needed to stay on task at the table. Designing those accommodations into the shape of the stool, the bulk of disruptive behavior, such as tipping back, kneeling, sitting in a chair backwards or sideways, all those amazing poses you see with traditional classroom seating, is eliminated. The picture here shows our thick, strong little bones called ischial tuberosities, or sit bones. They're highlighted there in red. They are what we use to locate ourselves when sitting. For good vestibular and proprioceptive and core development, children use these bones to anchor and locate themselves. The firm, flat top of this stool provides an ideal surface for them to develop that. And when children are allowed to locate themselves on that stool, firmly planting their feet on the floor and making the subtle movements they need for comfort, that child feels secure. Because the feeling of feeling anchored removes the stress of not knowing where their body is located in space. And, once again, helps maintain their focus on learning. It's important to onboard all this information so you understand the potential benefits of using the Grow-Right Stool in your classroom for your children. So that's a quick overview of the research and technical aspects behind the design. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jamie, who is going to show you all its cool features, and then we'll get back into answering your questions. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Molly. That was very interesting and informative, helpful to go over all that research. I'm going to do a little bit on the actual product here, and then obviously if you have questions, please go ahead and post those, but I'm going to go through a few of the features that are specific to this in relation to the research that Molly went over. So I think there's a couple things that are critical with the use of this stool. And first I want to say that in doing this project, no one from Community Playthings is advocating for longer sitting times. We're advocating for better sitting times. And so just to highlight that and reinforce that, it's not about creating a longer duration, but while you are asking for children to sit at table time, that there's this a better learning environment. So obviously we have a nice heavy wooden top on this stool. The nice heavy rounds on the edges facilitate a lot better blood flow, like was spoken of earlier, allows the child to move back and forth, change the pressure points on their upper leg, as well as their ischial tuberosity or sit bones here. So very intentionally done. This space here on the nose of the stool also allows the child's legs to spread apart, giving better triangle stability or anchoring for the child. So again, giving a better base to work from. It's important that the child's feet can still go flat on the floor, and that expectation should still be there. But what we've noticed in our field testing is this phenomenal amount of movement, subtle movements in the feet where children are changing positions, and that will happen back and forth with the child's feet. But when you're positioning a child for the correct sizing and heights, that's an important piece to remember. We have this designed for 2 to 6-year-old children, and as you're transitioning this into your program or into children who are new to this type of seating, it's important that as a teacher, as an educator, that is done carefully. It obviously doesn't have a back, that's intentional, but for a child who has low muscle tone or low core strength, it's an important piece to keep in mind as the transition is being made. What we see typically is that children do extremely well once they've gone through that first transition, so that they understand how to use the stool. And it is incredibly intuitive and thrilling to watch these children use that on a daily basis as soon as they understand the parameters and also use the prompts that are on the stool. So for instance, when they're sitting on the stool, the inside of this curve here is often referenced on the inside of the leg of the child to know where the stool is in relation to the body. So getting on and off is very fascinating to watch. We did design 2 inches of adjustability into the leg, which is easy to go up and down. There's a little button here. We do not anticipate children doing this themselves. We anticipate this being done by a staff member. But it makes it very easy to adjust through the year as the children are growing to go up and down these 2 inches of height. That makes an enormous difference because we know that all children are not the same size. There's no average child, and we want to accommodate for those different sizes of children in a classroom environment. So that's a great feature which we feel is excellent for helping to accommodate these different sizes of children. I want to just go over a couple of other pieces here. Obviously, this stool does stack. It stacks up about 5 high, so you can just place them round. And so for a footprint or classroom space, That's easy to put on the side and stack up. The other thing is that it easily slides underneath the table, and because it doesn't have a back, it can go all the way underneath the table. So you can account for a bit more floor space when they're not being used. Like I said, anchoring is really important. Feet flat on the floor, getting a child to a stable position. I think if there's one piece that I would like to take away from this webinar, that is as you get the child to sit higher, and it's significantly higher than typically 90-90-90 would be. So the angle from the upper leg is at a nice slope. You get a child sitting on here, feet flat on the floor. It's much higher than you would see on a typical chair. And I think that if you can take that away, that is really the critical piece, because if you don't do that, you're not going to see the benefits that this stool brings. Now, with that, it also means that the tables are going to need to go higher. And what I would say for right now, we're working on recommendations that are more specific, but use the working position. So the upper arm at a nice 45 degree, the lower arm flat on the table. So that's what we're calling the working position. So when a child is placed on the stool, nice upper leg slant, feet flat on the floor, the table then should be at a working position for those children. Does every child need to have their own stool height or their own table height? What we have found is that because the upper angle of the leg is not so critical, so when you're sitting at 90 degrees, it's very important, because otherwise you get the seat cutting into their leg. What we have found is as soon as you get the children up, that upper leg angle is not so critical. So a little bit higher or a little bit lower is not going to make or break this for them. So by buying this size of stool, first off, you get 2 inches of adjustability, but second off, you can accommodate for more children's sizes on the same seating piece, the stool. So getting the stool higher, getting the table higher is critical for this to be successful. Like I said earlier, if you don't do that, there's not a whole lot of value in putting this in your classroom. So it's a shift. We understand that. We understand that this is going to be a challenge to put into the classroom in a conventional seating posture, but we feel the benefits of this is so important. And what that would be the two things, if there's nothing else you take away: stool height and table height are critical to getting right for children. But you have a lot more flexibility in your size as long as you're getting them up higher.
Right. I was thinking, while we're waiting for questions to come in via the chat, Jamie, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Is there any way that I could easily tell or have a quick guideline just by looking at my classroom if the stool is set to the right height?
So yes, that is a good question. Obviously, we have age recommendations on the website with the product, and the age recommendations are around typical size of children through that age range. So for instance, if you're on the top end of 2-year-olds, you're going to want to go in a stool that's sized for 2 to 3-year-olds, for instance. And again, just to reinforce, when you put a child on the stool, make sure that that upper leg is down like it is on the picture of the horse rider. So we want to make sure that that upper leg is nicely sloped, and then the feet are flat on the floor. And that will give us confirmation around the better positioning. The fascinating thing that we see with that is when they're in that position, the ability to move is significantly increased, but the movement is not taking away from the learning. And that is just amazing, because the child is deeply engrossed in the learning that they're experiencing and not worried about where their body is in space, how they're sitting, are they uncomfortable. they are just actually learning. And that is just fascinating to watch. So it's been an amazing privilege to watch these children as they go through the trial process we did on this, and see how much more learning there is in that.
It looks like there's a few people just spinning off on the discussion you had. You briefly touched on table height. Obviously, this is a Community Playthings product. How do they pair with Community Playthings tables? You know, our table line, we have our classroom and multi-tables.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So from Community Playthings, we have two different table lines. We have the thinner multi-table lines, and we have the thicker classroom table lines. Both of those have adjustable legs, and those adjustable legs can be easily adjusted up and down by a staff member or by a teacher. And when you are putting those into your classroom environment, that gives you the flexibility year over year or even through the year to adjust those up and down depending on the children that you have in that class. So just to make sure, if you buy the adjustable legs that go with the Community Playthings tables, then you can go up and down a significant amount of adjustment with the stools. So that gives you that flexibility to do that over the year. And I think that's also an important thing because we know that children grow significant amounts during the year. So just to set it up at the beginning of the year and expect that to go all the way through is not actually going to be setting up for success, because we know that that's going to need to be adjusted as the year goes through.
I'm seeing another really interesting question here from one of our people. Can you talk a little more about the movement that the stool allows for in thinking in comparison with, say, the movement from wobble stools, and how does that differ?
So wobble stools definitely have their place, and I'm not going to go into the science and the research behind the wobble stools. What I would say is for young children, and this is where we're primarily talking is for 2 to 6 year olds, the wobble stool provides a lot of movement, but it is taking a lot of the brain's energy to maintain the body position on the stool. So what we've found is that by having this as a static stool or a non-movable stool, the children are moving their feet to accommodate for changing pressure points, increased blood flow, all the type of activity that we would like to see from an active seating piece, but they're on an incredibly stable position. And I always imagine like a 3-year-old trying to eat their lunch on a wobble stool. It's just completely unrealistic to expect that. But with this stool, we're seeing very strong anchoring and very stable base to be able to work from while still accommodating for this movement. And I think as you see the children's feet going back and forth from a flat position to up on their toes, back to a flat, what's happening in that case is that they're actually rotating the ischial tuberosity back and forth so that they're creating the reduction of pressure points as they are sitting. And I think that it took a little while for us to understand what they were doing by moving their feet back and forth, but they're creating the same concept with that the wobble stool is doing, but they're doing it themselves. The other thing I would say is as soon as that upper leg drops, you immediately see the back go into a nice curve like you spoke about earlier. And I think as we would like to see children in better long-term development positions, this is a really important piece, is to get that back into a better position, get the head over the shoulders over the back, so that there's that's correct. So it gives them a good base to work from as they are developing.
Okay, one of our people that's listening here, they're wondering, do you have any recommendations of how, when your classroom is already using the traditional seating model, how to gradually introduce it to the classroom, a bit of a seamless transition, so it's not
So yeah, that's a good question. I think it's really important that the teachers are educated on this, that the staff members involved are educated on this, and that there's an understanding of setting it up for success. So could you set this up in an art corner, for instance, where the children are doing a lot of standing work already, or are doing sit to stand work, so that you can accommodate for them reaching over to get something, or to be able to go from standing to a sitting position for more concentrated work, or be able to change their positions. So that could be a place that is integrated this stool. I think if that's the way that you would like to do it, that could be a pathway of getting that into your classroom. Again, having educators be successful with this is really important for us. We do not want to just put it out there and have people not set it up in correct positions and then not be successful. So if that's a way that you would like to do it in your classroom, yes, that is a way that would be very successful.
Transition.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for this webinar. It was fascinating to go over. It's been a fascinating learning experience for us.
It really has.
And hopefully that answers some of the questions. Of course, if you have further questions, you're welcome to reach out to your account managers. Thank you for your time. We certainly appreciate you being on today, and we wish you all the best for the rest of this year.